I hope we are ready for the off again. You're all replenished, powered up for the afternoon session. Can I just please ask now, because we're back in session effectively, so I don't want to get too schoolmasterly, but come and take a seat, sit down, get ready, because we've got a large dose of inspiration, among other things, for you. We also have involvement and inclusion. It's all wrapped up in our first package. So this is pretty special. We're going to enjoy a conversation between two very significant characters here. And I'm going to ask Amy and Lee, can you both come up straight away? Come and take a seat up on the stage. And as you do that, I'll make some introductions. Because as I said, these are the themes for us in a conference like this. We tackle inclusion, we tackle involvement, we look at the issues of inspiration and how we get there. And we have it in abundance. Amy Mullins, thank you very much indeed for being with us here today. Amy is, an athlete of the highest standing, an actress, former model, she insists. I think she could be a current model. She is a Georgetown University alum. Can I just say also as an Englishman, I've never used the word alum before. So I'm feeling quite liberated. Alum, sorry. I beg your pardon. I'll never use it again. Sorry, completely off the point though. So Amy has just the most incredible story to tell. She was 1 year old when she had amputations on both legs below the knee. And yet she competed as the first female amputee taking part in the NCAA ever. In Division 1 against elite athletes. She is a Paralympian from Atlanta 96 in sprints and long jump. President of the Women's Sports Foundation. She was chef de mission for the US Olympic Committee for the Paralympic Games of 2012 in London. As I say, she's also been a model for luminaries like Alexander McQueen, no less, and an actor working with Oliver Stone, and actors including David Suchet and Andy Garcia. And as you will all know, I have to confess I didn't know this, Stranger Things on Netflix is one of the biggest things on Netflix, and Amy is one of the stars in Stranger Things. So this is an extraordinary character achieving extraordinary things. And she's going to be interviewed loosely, have a conversation with Lee Reed. Lee is the, as you know, Director of Athletics here at Georgetown University, has been for pushing a decade now, and has had great success in that time nurturing athletes and coaches and pulling achievement out of them. He's the president of the National Association of Collegiate Directors of Athletics, was for 2018 to 2019, a basketball player, that won't surprise you. And I should say, Black Enterprise magazine listed him as one of the 50 most powerful African Americans in sport. So this is quite a couple here. Lee is also a very natty dresser and damn good in front of a camera, so they have a lot in common. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Lee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This is quite an honor to be here with Amy, but to also be here with all of you and to host this wonderful conference. I'd want to pay tribute to some of my staff who are in the room here today that work, and also the administrators, the athletics administrators, in the room from other universities that work so hard in this business of sport in terms of education of our student athletes. And there's also a few of our student athletes. I see our SAC president is here, Margot. So we're really excited to have everybody here today and for this exciting conversation. I will tell you, as you see, and I've been listening today, I've been in and out, and as I see some of the words that have been described about sport, joy, enlightenment, respect, I got to tell you, I wasn't feeling any of those words last night when we were down by 19. sport does have an amazing way of sort of bringing you back. But boy, last night, those 6 words, those 6 values were not top of mind. There were another 6 words that I was thinking about that cannot be repeated here. But all is well that ends well. We're off to a great start, and proud of our basketball program, and I think you're going to hear from our coach later on, Patrick Ewing, who was obviously you've had some interaction with, right? Yeah. Let's start, Amy. We heard a little bit of her bio, but I just want to some of the words that have been used to describe Amy: athlete, model, actress, Olympian, Hall of Famer, brand, ambassador, public speaker, advocate, daughter, wife, and Georgetown graduate, class of '98.
SFS.
SFS, yeah. And they're celebrating an anniversary as well. Of all of those adjectives, which one means the most to you?
Lee brings it. Forgive me for going a bit rogue, but it's not on that list. And it's Amy Mullins. It's I believe in the holistic nature of a human being, and that we can be all those things moving through time, and you know, certainly coming back to this campus stirs so much, because I did grow up in a Catholic household. My mother thought for a while she might want to be a Franciscan nun. She was a novitiate, I think, for 5 years, and then she didn't take her final vows. She bought a Mercury Cougar and a pair of hot pants and left Philadelphia and drove to the Bronx. She eventually met my dad, and they got married, and they had me. But that thing never left, right? So I was not going to a Catholic school. That was like threatened on me. As you know, if you don't shape up, we're putting you in Catholic school. And then, you know, I end up at a Jesuit university, and not a week goes by that I don't think about, you know, Sister Helen Prejean coming to ethics and public policy class to talk about the death penalty. You know, just the professors I had access to, the speakers that would come to campus, the idea that no matter what you studied, you had to take philosophy and ethics and theology, and studying with Rabbi White, the wisdom of the Jewish tradition was one of my favorite classes. The fact that Georgetown was about teaching us how to think and not what to think really solidified for me this idea that we are like a gemstone, and you can turn the gemstone and have the light shine through a different facet, but all those other facets are still there and make up the whole.
Wow. So your formation, you touched on it a little bit. So the audience can know a little bit about your background. When you were, I think, about 14 years old, there was a story of buying a dress.
Oh, man.
Do you remember that story?
I do.
Yeah.
You want me to tell that story?
Yeah, let's talk.
Okay, so I'm throwing my parents under the bus. But my dad emigrated to the U.S. from Ireland, and he never got to have the opportunity of education past the age of 15. And, you know, my dad's a plasterer by trade and can build anything. My mom was cleaning houses. She worked at craft, but education was king. And so my dad, when I was a little girl, on a job site, you know, he would give me a brick and a trowel, and I'd get to plaster around. And he said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Plasterer." And he said, "You will be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer." He can't fathom that I don't have a real job. He cannot believe that I went to a fancy university and don't have a real job. 14 years old, you know, the work ethic was strong in an immigrant household, you know. And so I got a paper route when I was 12. You know, my brother and I we would shovel people's driveways, he would mow lawns, I would have the weed whacker. You know, we had businesses going. You know, I had a babysitting empire. But age 12, I got a paper route, and it was a good paper route. It's like 65 papers every morning. So, you know, that was some good bank. And my mom's one of 11 kids. Her mother, my grandmother, was a seamstress, so hand-me-downs. You know, everything I'm wearing in every school picture growing up, my cousin Andrew had on the year before. Matt had it the year before that. And you can just trace outfits for decades that just, you know, grandma would take up the hem, let out the hem. So it was a huge deal. Never bought anything that wasn't on sale. And there was this store called The Limited that in junior high was sort of the thing, right? And unfortunately, it was a time when I remember, you know, girls could be their worst. And the label of what you were wearing really mattered, and my parents refused to, you know, cater to that, rightfully. And so I went and bought, with my paper route money, 2 dresses. They were $40 a piece. That was a lot of money. Big money. Yeah, $80 for 2 dresses. And these were so great. It was like a kind of a wannabe Yves Saint Laurent safari dress with a belt, and it hit right at the knee. And so I had wooden legs growing up, and they were held on with Velcro straps that were riveted to either side of the knee, which ruined stockings. So the second you put stockings on, you're having runners, you know. And I was you know, what they used to call tomboy. Now it's just very physically active. So I always had runners in my stockings. But my mom had been an athlete, so it wasn't something that was you know, yeah, she was a good athlete. And I came downstairs for Easter Mass. My dad was always ready before everyone else, sitting there reading the paper, and he would barely kind of, you know, glance over the top of the paper, but he did. And because the dress hit right at the kneecap, when I walked, you could see the outline of the wooden legs, and you could see the rivets. And he just went, "You go back upstairs and change, it doesn't look right." And I remember thinking, this is the best thing I've ever owned in my life. I look amazing. This is incredible. And I knew what he meant, but it was something snapped in me. I wanted to challenge him on this. And I said, "I think I look great." And he said, "No, you can see the, you know, your legs. It doesn't look right. You need to go up and change." And I refused. And I was grounded. And after Easter Sunday Mass, we all go to my grandmother's house, and my mom, one of 11, you can imagine, it's just wonderful chaos. And I told, of course, all my aunts, my mom has 8 sisters, "Amy, you look so lovely. Look at you. You look, you know, like," I was ladylike, which was a big deal for them. You know, occasionally, once a year, I could sort of pull it together. And I said, "Oh, really? Because Mom and Dad think I look inappropriate." And it was like, I think for my parents to hear that out loud, you know, they realized, you know, that it wasn't the way to go. And I realized, actually, in remembering that story, how hard it must have been for them as parents when you want to protect your kids from people staring and being, you know, rude and presumptive and going to some serious lengths. You know, I had coaches that didn't want me on the softball teams, even though later I got the stolen bases record. Wooden legs sliding into second base has an advantage. It's for real. She got out of the way. They learn. They learn in the leagues. But yeah, it was something where I, as an adult, reflecting and thinking how frustrating it must have been for a very proud man like my father to see and feel what I had lived with my whole life, which is people staring, and knowing that you're being considered as other. And it's something that, ironically, I think every human being has actually experienced that sense of feeling like you're other at some point in your life. And I think it's one of the things that connects us as human beings.
So the question, the reason I asked it, because it stood out to me as sort of in your evolution as a young person, you were starting to really become the woman that you have become today relative to being very, very secure in who you are as a human being. And that was one of the outward things early on in your life that you did. And there's just been this steady progression in terms of your confidence from within, in terms of who you are and what you bring to the world. And it's been fascinating to kind of find more out about you and learn about your story. You came to Georgetown University, School of Foreign Service. You've always been an athlete, and you wanted to take that to another level. So this coach, Gagliano, you want to
Some
talk
guy.
about Gags? Yeah, I think he's a legend in Georgetown lore. If you don't know about our track and field program, it's one of the best in the country, and we've had numerous Olympians, we've had numerous All-Americans, we've had numerous NCAA champions, but you came across campus to his office in McDonough Gym,
Yeah.
and tell us about that conversation, your relationship with him.
Well, the backstory on this is that I was one of 3 kids that won a full academic scholarship from the Defense Department. And the idea was that they wanted to get, some diversity. And in exchange for paying tuition, I would be an employee, basically a full-time employee, and full-time employee in the summers, and then after graduation. And so when I got the notice of all the schools I'd gotten into, the government scholarship didn't award, they didn't tell us who the winners were for another almost 2 months. So there was one school left who didn't have to go to their wait list, and that was GW, which I had never been to. I had never, it wasn't my intended school. So I started there, and it was kind of stumbling in track and field. I had never run without a ball to take your mind, and you realize why the ball is really important when you don't have it, because it's just you and your breath and your pain. And so when someone has suggested that I compete in a meet in Boston, it was actually a guy who had run at UMass, and he was working at one of the places on Wisconsin Avenue. It was a restaurant. And I remember being he said, there's other people like you. And I said, what, like blondes? What do you mean? And he said, I don't know, people in wheelchairs and stuff. And I was like, that's a different thing. And I went home and I was so irked. I was like, why would this guy, I was on a championship softball team, like, I played volleyball, swimming. It was like, and I had to be, to keep up. It was like, you had to be that good. And I thought, I clearly don't know anything about disabled sports, and that's why it bothered me, because I was judging something and I was completely ignorant about it. So I signed up for this meet in Boston, and it was the National Disabled Sports Championships, but I had never run at all. And long story short, I go up, I win, and I'm like, I got less than a year before the Olympic trials for the Atlanta Games. And I need to know how to actually do this. So someone said, Georgetown has a really great track program. So I came back, I called information, 411, and I said, can you connect me to Georgetown? Got the main switch at Georgetown. Can you connect me to the track coach? And I get this voicemail. It's like, leave a message. So I did. I was like, hi, my name is Amy. And I'm the new national record holder in the 100-meter, but for disabled athletes. But I've only run one race, and I was really hoping I could come sit in on a couple of your practice sessions so I could learn. That's what I asked. I wanted to sit on the bleachers. Didn't call me back. And I called again, and then he didn't call me back. And then my roommate, I was living in Foggy Bottom, my roommate said, whatever happened to that, And I said, he didn't call me back. She said, well, why don't you try one more time? You never forgive yourself if you don't. And I did, and he answered. And I was like, oh, I stammered, and I went into my spiel that I had left him on his voicemail twice by this point. And he said, why don't we meet first before we decide anything? So I came to his office, and I got there before he did, and I was dwarfed by all these framed photos of every amazing runner he's coached. And I thought, I should just get out now before I make a complete fool. And he came in, and we ended up talking, and he said to me, you show up here 3 times a week on my lunch break, and I'll train you, which was 10 times more than I'd asked. And 2.5 months later, he said, you should run here. So I became, they didn't, School of Foreign Service generally didn't have a lot of athletes, and didn't really take half your transfers. So it was, I remember it was the last, I think it was December 23rd, and I was the last, I felt like I was the last student left in DC. It was, and I got my acceptance letter, and it's actually very emotional, because I remember getting my Georgetown paraphernalia and driving across Key Bridge, looking at this place on the hill, thinking, I can't believe I get to go here.
That's amazing. I have that same feeling when, no, seriously, when you come across the Key Bridge, and you realize that you have the opportunity to work at a place that values, and not only values, but it demands of us that we be our best selves in every aspect of our lives, and that the balance that we can provide or help provide to our student athletes, that they can come here and be the absolute best athlete they can be. They can come here and get the absolute best education they can get, and that they'll do that in an environment that really is inspiring, that develops them in a holistic way. It truly is touching, and I know your emotion. I know how you feel about Coach Gaggs, and we were with him this summer, and he starts to tear up when he thinks about you. But the fact that you coming together with Coach Gaggs at a place like Georgetown University is not surprising, because of all of the values that each of us hold. And so I know that was a special time in your life, and I know Gaggs, for him, that was a special time. So he told me to tell you hello.
I love him.
But he is awesome. So it's mind-boggling to me that you go from somebody telling you can't do something. Not only did you go to Boston, but you win the race and set a record.
Sometimes naivete is strong. It works for you.
That's amazing.
I didn't. Also, I had wooden legs, so it was the first time I saw carbon fiber. I mean, it wasn't what I ended up running with at Georgetown, so I got to be the guinea pig for those. But it was, a shin with a shock absorber. It was a flex foot, what they call it, and they were looking at me like, well, you're from Allentown, aren't you? I was like a baby woolly mammoth found frozen in the ice, these wooden legs. And it was like, but this is before Google. This is 1995. You know what I mean? It's before you could just find out, and it wasn't like insurance companies were chomping at the bit to give you
That's right.
to give you the greatest stuff that was available. So. Yeah, that time with Coach Gaggs and Ron Helmer as well. When I started that winter season, I just remember all Gaggs said was the first track practice was, "This is Amy Mullins. She's from Allentown. She's going to sprint." And because I still had the kind of wooden legs, they looked like a human leg, the shape was. 2 months later, I show up on in the cheetah legs, and that was a whole other, another chapter in the story. But I just remember there was no discussion, no fanfare, and because I just remember Gang saying, I've never coached an athlete with prosthetic legs, and you've never been coached, so neither of us, you know,
Can't go wrong.
yeah, you can't, there was no baggage that either of us had. It was just like, I had the will, he had the way, I had to do the work, and it was an incredible nest that, you know, two scholarships in the last 2 years were given Division I track to amputees. You know, in 25 years, there's kids who've been born and raised who absolutely see that as an opportunity that they can and should
No
be competing
boundaries.
at the highest levels of their sport
That's awesome.
and integrated.
So 1996, it's a pretty good year.
Was.
What happened?
Um,
Small thing called the
yeah, the
Olympics?
games in Atlanta. Yeah, I got the last spot on the team. Somewhere I still have the answering machine tape of like getting the news. But yeah, it was an extraordinary time. You know, the Paralympics existed solely at that time under the Olympic umbrella, and it didn't have the structure that it now does, you know, and the support in the organization. And, you know, now, as of the last year, 18 months, there's equal pay offered for medal winners, which is huge. And you kind of think, wow, 2018 it took, but there's been leaps in the last 20 years. But when I competed for the United States, they don't call it Hot Atlanta for nothing. And it was 118 on the track that day, and my legs were held on with a suction socket. So it was like a silicone that you'd roll a little silicone sleeve over. And I had learned the hard way, because I was the guinea pig on those cheetah legs, right? No one had them in the world, and I was testing them. And it took me a full month to be able to run 100 meters. I could run 5 meters, and I would just, trip and land into the lacrosse practice. Just remember the lacrosse, girl with the legs is in the field again. It's humiliating. And I remember wanting to, I think at some point, took the leg and was like, pfft. And Kevin, who's a shot put guy, said to me, aim 5 meters today, 5 meters tomorrow, in 20 days you got your race. And
wow.
And once I did, then it started, I really could, because with a wooden leg, there's no flexion in an ankle, right? So no matter how great your stride length, you're gonna hit heel strike every time. Right. So the idea with the cheetah leg is that it mimics the way a sprinter is up on the balls with their feet, yeah. Right? But there was a lot of unknown things. So that year in spring at the Big East Championship, which was at Villanova, it was the first warm meet of the year. And what happened is I'm warming up, doing my drills, and I'm sweating, and the sweat is working its way up. And 80 meters into the 100-meter race, which I should have set a personal record, I went on the right leg and came out and went down. And it's like, by this point, news has gotten around that there's a girl at Georgetown running with these funky legs, right? So there's TV cameras, and I, and I just remember scrambling, just burn, when your ears burn with that kind of that kind of humiliation. And I went over and found, Gags would always kind of be in his own part of the stands, just alone and pacing. And he looked at me and he went, you okay, kid? And I was like, yeah. And I covered up the fact that I actually wasn't okay. But I knew I had to be okay. And certainly the biggest thing that was bruised was my ego, because that was kind of the most vulnerable thing, to be in public without your leg, And I had been putting all that aside, running years of, even standing up to my dad in that way. I didn't want the legs to be the focus of my life. That wasn't the most interesting thing about me. And I just wanted to kind of blend in. And that time in my life was about accepting the challenge of being extraordinary. Saying you're not normal. And you're not going to maybe, why blend in when you could stand out? And Gag said, well, I'm glad, you're fine. Stay loose because the 200's coming up in 30 minutes. And I was like, what? You didn't see what? You just saw that? My leg came off. Really, it didn't stay on for 100 meters. It's not going to stay on for 2. And he just went, got to do the deuce.
You got to do the deuce.
And he ignored me, and I panicked, and I think I started crying. I begged, please, God, please, do you understand? Why my leg is going to come off. People are going to be pointing and screaming and fainting. And he just stopped me and he went, so what? So what if your leg falls off? You pick it up, you put it on, you finish the gosh darn race. He did not say gosh darn.
You did.
Get out there and run the deuce. And it was like, I just remember whatever he would do to me if I didn't run that race would be so much worse. I'm like, I don't know these people. Who cares? Yeah. Who cares if I'm embarrassed? And it actually was just such an extraordinary lesson because he did that thing that you need a coach to do, which is help you get out of your own way. And it's a hard challenge to yourself to say, do you have what it takes to accept that this challenge of being extraordinary, the challenge and the responsibility of it.
So sport has shaped you on many levels, and it's been sort of the like you said, you're always sort of an athlete. You're always an Olympian. What are the things you today in terms of your advocacy for young people? What are the things you hope that you see in the next 5 to 10 years as we move forward? Like you mentioned, there are more athletes, there's more inclusion, there are more people involved. We want everybody to feel comfortable and be able to be their very best self. What are the things that you're working on now that contribute to that?
Well, certainly, I'm very fortunate and proud to be a trustee of the Women's Sports Foundation, and the idea that any of us who've ever played sports knows what you learn from it, and when I think of being a student athlete at SFS, and I had 6 courses and was training, I was never a better time manager than that. I mean, you student athletes, you learn time management, you learn how to you learn leadership, you learn when to stand up and lead, and you learn when to give way and support someone else. The teamwork. And especially for women, you find your voice. I got it. You have to speak up and speak out, and also physically claim your space. There's something about being in your body that is extraordinary training, I think, for us to be evolved human beings. The disconnect from your body is, I think, the beginning of a lot of trouble, for people. So what I hope to see in the next 5-10 years is just that we manage to keep more kids physically active, especially girls in underserved areas. When we have this wonderful opportunity of people coming to America from other cultures and bringing elements of, bringing their culture with them, but there's the fantastic thing about this country is watching how boys today, young boys, don't know what that expression "throw like a girl" means. Which is fantastic. They've grown up watching Serena, and they see of course their sister would play sports, their mom played sports. So I mean, we're only the first generation of Title IX parents right now. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years. And also, you know, there's never going to be more amputees than there are. I mean, I'm sorry, there's going to only be more because of better technology and earlier cancer detection and people living long. You know, there's just the idea of a changed body and soldiers, you know, that people, because their body has changed, they don't want to become irrelevant. They want to stay engaged in their life, and there's never been more opportunity to do it because of the connectivity of the internet. People can find out what's available, they can connect, but also I think taking the taboo off of this idea of us and them, you know, that the categories that
People try to.
yeah, the people used to put you in baskets because of your ethnicity and your race and your gender, and you know, we see this now that young people want fluidity in so many areas of their life. They want the right to keep changing.
Isn't that sort of what sport brings to society? That's what we're talking about here today, sport at the service of humanity. That at least for me, the first place in my life where I felt totally comfortable and totally equal was playing a sport early on, and knowing that if I worked hard, if I gave my all, the other stuff, where I came from, the side of tracks, how I looked, the color of my skin, none of that mattered because I could go prove myself in that arena. And I think that's what this conference is about, isn't that what sort of it teaches those lessons in life, the connection between sport, humanity, society?
I think that we understand, again, that we want to shape society to have the values that we hold dear. You know, so when we look at these words like inclusion and involvement and, you know, inspiration, which is often abused, but it has to do with the breath, the life force, to take in life force. And there's a reason why, you know, people don't really go to the theater anymore, but you still go to a live sports game because you're watching somebody be completely present. They're alive, and it's glorious to watch somebody face very private struggles in a public way. And so it's a leveler, and it's a unifier, and you know, we understand, I think we connect in the most basic way to the content of our humanity through sport.
Well, I think our time is up. Any last remarks or anything you'd like to conclude on?
No, other than the fact that I think that conversations like this are conversations about how sports, you know, I think the arts, well, you know, the things that we're losing in our school systems because of budgetary reasons, why we need to remind ourselves and others, we need to shout it from the rooftops about how important it is. It's not just kicking a ball or throwing a ball, or, you know, these are the fundamentals of life, and we know how that once you learn these things, they never leave you. So I'm really proud that my alma mater is hosting this conference, and thrilled and honored that you invited me.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.